Imagine for a moment a woman without friends. Instantly you might picture someone lonely, isolated, perhaps longing for connection. But let's look at it a little more closely, beyond the usual labels. You see, we've been taught that friends and relationships are essential for happiness, that they're a measure of success. Society whispers, if you're not surrounded by people who love you, who are you? And yet, what if there was another way to look at it? In her solitude, this woman might be learning something extraordinary. She's no longer busy playing roles for other people, no longer consumed by who she's supposed to be for them. In this quiet space, something happens. She begins to look inward. She discovers that without the constant distraction of others' opinions, she can begin to explore herself. She no longer sees herself through the haze of others' expectations, but rather through the clarity of her own vision. When we're constantly surrounded by people, we often seek their approval, sometimes subconsciously, and this becomes a kind of prison. Think about it. Are we truly free when we need someone else's validation? When we need them to remind us of our worth? But this woman, let's call her a solitary seeker, starts to see her own company as a gift. She realizes that within her is a world as vast as any galaxy, waiting to be explored. And she learns that her peace does not depend on anyone else. She understands that while friends can bring joy, they can also bring distraction, confusion, and expectations that weigh heavily. So she asks herself, what if I simply sat with myself in complete acceptance? What if the woman with no friends could see herself as enough? Right here, right now. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying friendship is bad or unnecessary. Friends bring beauty, laughter, shared experiences, and meaning. But sometimes in their absence we can find something equally precious, a deeper friendship with ourselves. For some, solitude is a mirror, reflecting back all the things we often avoid. We see our fears, our doubts, our dreams. And as she spends time alone, she learns to embrace these things without judgment. She comes to know that her worth is not measured by the company she keeps, but by the peace she feels within herself. She begins to understand that friendship, like happiness, cannot be forced or demanded. It's something that flows naturally when it's ready. So rather than filling her life with people simply to avoid silence, she fills herself with her own quiet presence. In time, she may meet others who see her, not because she needs them, but because she genuinely wishes to share life with them. She finds that true friendship comes not from a place of lack, but from abundance and abundance of love and understanding she cultivated alone. So, if you find yourself with few friends or even none, take heart. You are in a rare and beautiful space, a space where you can learn the most profound lesson of all that who you are right now, without additions, without applause, is more than enough. When a person finds themselves alone, especially for an extended time, they are often pulled into a confrontation with the self. There is something unavoidable about solitude. It strips away the comfortable distractions of daily interactions, the noise of social obligations, and the endless currents of other people's opinions. Many might think that a life without friends is empty, a barren landscape void of warmth. But solitude can reveal itself as fertile ground for self-discovery. Alone, in the quiet absence of company, one begins to see the mind's activity in its raw, unfiltered form. The mind, no longer absorbed with external engagements, turns its attention inward. For a woman who finds herself without friends, there might be an initial sense of discomfort, or even a longing to return to the familiar rhythms of companionship. This is normal, as most people are raised to value connections as central to a fulfilled life. But with time, if she allows herself to sit with her aloneness without judgment, something profound happens. She starts to see aspects of herself that were previously masked by the expectations, opinions, and energy of others. Friends, family, colleagues, even casual acquaintances all contribute layers to a person's sense of identity, whether one is aware of it or not. In solitude, those layers begin to peel away. At first, she might encounter aspects of herself she isn't comfortable with, insecurities, doubts, even unfulfilled desires that she had perhaps suppressed. In the presence of others, these thoughts might have been buried, covered up by the momentum of conversation, social rituals, and the urge to fit into a shared narrative. But alone, there is no such buffer. Instead of fleeing from this confrontation, she gradually learns to observe herself as if from a distance, seeing her mind's tendencies without feeling a need to act on them. This process becomes one of acceptance, as she learns to be at peace with these aspects of herself. As she spends time observing her inner landscape, she realizes she is more than any single thought, insecurity, or desire. She starts to notice patterns, the way certain thoughts come and go, how feelings rise and dissipate, and the impermanence of emotions she once thought defined her. This awareness brings a liberating insight, the realization that she is not her thoughts or emotions, but the awareness behind them. This shift in perception brings a subtle but powerful freedom, as she becomes less reactive and more grounded in her sense of self. In solitude, the woman begins to see herself as a vast, complex being, capable of holding multitudes within her. Without the pressure to be anyone specific for others, she starts to explore interests, passions, and parts of herself that were previously neglected. Perhaps she discovers a love for art, music, writing, or nature, things she never fully explored because they didn't align with what others expected of her. Alone, she can immerse herself in these pursuits without judgment, discovering a joy that is free from external validation. Solitude gives her the gift of true creativity, a space to create, not for applause or approval, but for the simple, pure enjoyment of expression. In this process, she becomes her own friend, learning to enjoy her own company, and realizing that her contentment doesn't hinge on others. The depth of this self-discovery often transforms her understanding of relationships as well. She comes to see that friendships, while beautiful, can sometimes act as mirrors of approval rather than true connections. The tendency to seek validation or define oneself through relationships diminishes. She learns that her worth does not rely on how others see her, but on her own understanding of herself. This deepened self-awareness allows her to relate to people in a more genuine way, without the subconscious need to mold herself to meet their expectations. When she eventually re-engages with others, her connections are likely to be more authentic, because she has learned to relate without attachment or dependency. Solitude also brings a quiet kind of strength. She no longer feels the need to fill every silent moment with company, nor does she fear her own mind's company. This strength is not loud or dramatic, it's a calm assurance that arises from knowing oneself deeply. She realizes that, regardless of the fluctuations of relationships or external circumstances, there is a steady, unshakable center within her that she can return to. This sense of inner security gives her a quiet confidence, a resilience that cannot be easily shaken by external opinions or temporary setbacks. In this way, solitude transforms from an intimidating void into a space of inner exploration and growth. She learns that while friendships and relationships are beautiful and valuable, they are not essential for her happiness or self-worth. Her solitude teaches her that the most profound relationship she can cultivate is the one with herself. And in that self-relationship, she finds a peaceful, unwavering presence that enriches her life from the inside out. In a world where social connections and approval have become yardsticks of self-worth, learning to live without the constant need for validation is revolutionary. For a woman who finds herself without friends, this solitude offers her the chance to explore a life free from the grip of others' opinions and expectations. At first, she might feel a nagging discomfort, a sense that something is missing, a void where others' feedback used to be. But gradually, in this space of quiet, she discovers a sense of freedom that feels both unfamiliar and liberating. Without the usual reflections of herself bouncing back from friends, she begins to see herself without distortion, uncovering her own views, tastes, and strengths. The absence of friends means there are no immediate witnesses to her choices, no group consensus on what she should do, and no quick reinforcement for her decisions. It may sound daunting at first, because most people are used to living with an almost subconscious reliance on what others think. From small, everyday choices like fashion and hobbies to larger life decisions, the approval or disapproval of others often influences our paths. But for this woman, solitude invites a new way of being. She starts to experience decisions made purely for her own reasons, choices grounded in her own sense of what feels right, rather than what looks good in the eyes of others. This freedom from validation allows her to focus on her true values and desires. When no one is there to judge, she can fully explore her own motivations. She doesn't have to explain herself, seek approval, or mold her behavior to fit into someone else's idea of who she should be. If she decides to stay up all night working on a creative project, there's no need to justify it. If she feels like spending an entire weekend reading or wandering outdoors, she can do so without wondering what others might think. She learns to listen to her inner voice, a voice that often goes unheard in the hustle of social interactions and the expectations placed upon her by friends and society at large. As she spends more time without the presence of others' feedback, she notices how powerful her own opinion becomes. She learns to be her own judge, to trust her intuition, and to measure her worth based on her own standards. With time, she realizes that her life choices don't need external validation to be meaningful. They are meaningful because they come from her heart. She finds herself feeling more grounded and centered, as her choices now arise from a place of genuine self-respect and integrity. The satisfaction she derives from her actions no longer requires anyone else's endorsement, and this independence of mind brings a quiet, steady confidence. This journey isn't always straightforward. In moments of doubt, she might wonder if she's on the right path, especially when she doesn't have friends around to give her feedback or encouragement. She might occasionally feel the pull of insecurity, wondering if her choices would be acceptable in the eyes of others. But with each decision made on her own terms, she grows more resilient. She learns to soothe her own insecurities, becoming the source of her own comfort and reassurance. Each time she pushes through this doubt, she strengthens her inner resolve and trust in herself. A surprising byproduct of this freedom from validation is a deepened sense of compassion for others. Because she's learned to be patient and kind with herself, to forgive her mistakes without the usual social pressure, she finds it easier to extend this same understanding to others. She no longer judges people based on superficial standards because she knows what it feels like to grow outside of society's expectations. Having removed herself from the cycle of validation, she sees how it traps others, how it leads them to live inauthentically just to fit in. This awareness allows her to connect with people on a more genuine level when she eventually re-engages with the world. What's remarkable about her experience is that this newfound independence creates a subtle but powerful shift in how she relates to life. She becomes less reactive, less swayed by trends, and less anxious about fitting in. Her actions are less about proving something and more about fulfilling her own curiosity and passion. She feels lighter, unburdened by the need to live up to others' expectations, and this liberation brings an incredible clarity. She begins to understand that true freedom lies in being able to follow her own path, however unconventional it may be, without the burden of others' judgments. This freedom from external validation also opens doors to exploring her identity in ways she hadn't considered before. Without the limitations of others' opinions, she might try things that were once out of her comfort zone, things she thought she couldn't do because of the silent opinions of her friends or society. She takes risks not to impress anyone, but to see what she's capable of. Her failures don't feel like public downfalls, but private lessons. She embraces her mistakes as part of her journey, free from embarrassment or shame. This sense of experimentation allows her to know herself better, to trust in her ability to navigate life on her own terms. Ultimately, this journey in solitude teaches her that she is enough as she is, without the need for someone else to validate her existence or her choices. She comes to cherish her own company and becomes her own best ally. This strength, this independence, is profound because it is entirely self-created. And as she steps further into this space of self-reliance, she finds that what others think, though still present in the background, no longer dictates the course of her life. As a woman discovers peace in her own solitude, she begins to redefine what friendship truly means. Without the urgency to fill her life with people out of a need to escape loneliness, she approaches connection differently, without dependency, expectation, or a void to fill. Instead, she becomes open to relationships that arise naturally, rooted in shared understanding rather than necessity. This shift creates a space where friendship is not about completing each other, but about simply walking together, enjoying each other's presence without the pressure to fulfill roles. Her connection with herself gives her an inner abundance, an overflow of acceptance and self-assurance that shapes her relationships with others. When friendships emerge from abundance rather than need, they take on a rare, genuine quality. She no longer seeks friends as a remedy for loneliness or as a mirror for her self-worth. She feels fulfilled by her own presence and therefore approaches friendships from a place of contentment rather than dependency. This self-reliance allows her to give without expecting anything in return, to appreciate people for who they are, not for what they can provide. Her friends are not there to validate her, distract her, or define her. They are companions who enrich her life by simply being themselves. Without the fear of abandonment or rejection, she feels free to be her authentic self. And this openness creates a deep and lasting bond. Such friendships are marked by mutual respect and trust. She has learned to trust herself in solitude, so she naturally extends this trust to others. She doesn't feel the need to possess or control her friends because she does not depend on them to feel whole. Each person in her life is valued as an individual with their own path, not as a means to satisfy her emotional needs. This respect for others' independence is rare in friendships that arise from a place of scarcity, where people may cling to each other out of fear of loneliness. Instead, she is able to release her friends to be who they are, to follow their own dreams and paths without feeling threatened by their choices. Her ability to let others be, without pressure or expectation, invites a level of honesty in her relationships that she might not have experienced before. Since she isn't hiding any part of herself or tailoring her behavior to fit in, her friends feel comfortable doing the same. There's no need for pretense, no silent conditions that they must meet to stay in her life. This honesty creates a foundation where they can support each other fully, without judgment or comparison. She no longer feels the need to compete, as her self-worth is independent of others' achievements. In this way, her friendships are free from envy and filled with genuine joy for each other's successes. As she cultivates these friendships from a place of inner abundance, she also finds that she attracts people who resonate with her authentic self. These friends are not just passing acquaintances or companions of convenience, they are people with whom she shares a deep, unspoken understanding. She might meet someone who shares her love for solitude and self-discovery, or someone who understands the beauty of life's quieter moments. These connections feel effortless and natural, because they are based on shared values rather than a desire to fulfill any societal expectation of friendship. When she gives from a place of abundance, her friendships also become spaces of generosity. She's no longer giving just to get something back, to earn approval, or to maintain social standing. Instead, her kindness is rooted in genuine care, and her support is freely offered. This lack of transactional motive makes her friendships resilient. They are not swayed by misunderstandings or small disappointments, as each person knows the other's care is sincere. She is present in her friends' lives in a way that feels light and joyful, without the weight of unspoken obligations or hidden expectations. There's a beauty to the way these friendships develop organically. She no longer forces relationships into existence, nor does she cling to those that are fading naturally. She understands that people flow in and out of each other's lives, much like the ebb and flow of the seasons. Rather than fearing this natural cycle, she embraces it, allowing her friends the freedom to grow and change, just as she has done on her own. When someone drifts away, she feels gratitude for the time shared, rather than grief for what is lost. Her sense of abundance reassures her that her worth is intact, and she feels whole, with or without any specific person. Friendships built on abundance are also immune to the fear of losing each other. This woman knows that true friendship is not about constant closeness or the obligation to stay in touch at all times. She may not speak to her friends every day or even every month, but when they reconnect, the bond remains as strong as ever. These friendships do not demand constant reinforcement. They thrive on the quiet understanding that each person is there for the other. Even in silence, distance or time does not weaken the connection, because it is rooted in a mutual recognition of each other's inner strength. Perhaps the most profound transformation is that her friendships now reflect her own journey of self-acceptance. As she has come to love herself fully, she finds it easier to accept others, flaws and all. She no longer judges her friends for their mistakes, nor does she feel the need to correct them. Her friendship is a gentle reminder that each person's path is unique, and she respects the learning process of those she cares about. Her friends, in turn, feel free to be vulnerable, knowing they will not be judged or abandoned. In her friendships, there is a sense of spaciousness, of ease. She does not fear losing these connections because she knows they are based on something deeper than shared interests or convenience. The abundance within her allows her to hold these friendships lightly, knowing that they are grounded in mutual respect, trust, and love. And as she continues to grow, her friendships grow with her, each one a reflection of her inner peace and independence.